The phone vibrated in my hand right as the pastor said, "Ashes to ashes, dust to dust." I was standing at my husband's grave, staring at a casket that held 42 years of my life, when a message from an unknown number popped up on my screen. 4 words, just 4. "I'm alive. That's not me." For a second, I honestly thought my mind had finally snapped. Grief does that to you. It messes with time, memory, reality. But then another message came in, colder than the first. "Don't trust our sons." My knees almost gave out right there in the cemetery, because the 2 men standing beside me, calm, composed, barely shedding tears, were my sons. And suddenly, nothing about my husband's death felt real anymore. Before I go any further, let me say this. If you've ever trusted someone with your whole heart, especially family, you need to hear this story all the way through. And if you appreciate real, raw stories that unfold like a movie but hit like real life, take a second right now. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. It helps the channel more than you think. And trust me, you don't want to miss how this story ends. My name is Margot Hayes. I'm 66 years old, and what I'm about to tell you didn't just change my life. It shattered everything I thought I knew about love, family, and the people I raised. The funeral for my husband, Ernest, was supposed to be the quietest, saddest day of my life. And it was, but not for the reason you'd expect. It wasn't quiet because people didn't care. It was quiet because something was very, very wrong. Ernest and I had been married for 42 years. 42. We met when I was 24, back in a small town called Spring Creek, one of those places where everybody knows everybody, where nothing ever really changes. Or at least, that's what I used to believe. I remember the first time I saw him like it was yesterday. I was walking to the market in a faded green dress and shoes that seen better days. I was broke, exhausted, and taking care of my sick mother. Ernest stepped out of his little bike repair shop with grease on his hands and the shyest smile I'd ever seen. "Good morning, Margot," he said. "Need me to check your bike?" I didn't even own a bike, but I made one up just to keep him talking. That lie turned into coffee. Coffee turned into long talks under the old oak tree in Town Square Park. Those talks turned into promises, and those promises turned into a simple wedding, full of hope and not much else. We were poor. No way around it. We lived in a tiny 2-bedroom house with a tin roof that leaked every time it rained. We used pots to catch the water and laughed about it like it was no big deal. Ernest worked sun up to sun down, fixing bikes and small machines. I sewed clothes for women in town. We didn't have much money, but we had something better. We had peace. Then came our sons. Charles was born first. Big eyes like his father, smile like mine. 2 years later, Henry arrived, just as perfect. I poured my entire soul into raising those boys. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every prayer. All for them. Ernest was a hands-on dad, fishing trips on Sundays, teaching them how to fix things, bedtime stories every night. We were a close family, or so I thought. As the boys grew older, something started to shift. Charles, especially, always wanted more. More money, more status, more life than what Spring Creek could offer. "Why don't we have a car like other families?" he'd ask. "Why do we live like this?" When Charles turned 18, Ernest offered him a job at the shop, a chance to learn the trade, maybe even take it over one day. Charles didn't just say no, he rejected it with contempt. "I'm not getting my hands dirty like you, Dad. I'm going to be someone important." I saw that sentence land like a punch to Ernest's chest. He never talked about it, but I'd find him sitting on the porch late at night, staring at the stars, quiet in a way that scared me. Henry followed Charles in everything, always had. If Charles wanted out, Henry wanted out. And somehow, Charles did make it. He moved to the city, got into real estate, started making money. Real money. Henry followed soon after. I was proud at first, what mother wouldn't be? But pride slowly turned into distance. Phone calls got shorter. Visits became rare. When they did come home, they arrived in expensive cars, dressed in suits, talking about investments like we were speaking a foreign language. They looked at our house like it embarrassed them. "Mom," Charles said once, glancing around the living room, "you and Dad should really move somewhere nicer. This place is falling apart." That house was falling apart, sure, but it was our house. Every wall held memories. Every scratch told a story. That place was our life. Ernest said it best one night over coffee on the porch. "Money changed our boys, Margot. We're not enough for them anymore." I didn't want to believe him. I kept making excuses. They're busy, they've got careers, they'll come around. But deep down, I knew. Things got worse when Charles married Jasmine. She was city-polished, high heels sinking into our dirt porch the first time she visited. Her smile never reached her eyes. She barely touched the food I cooked. And when she thought I couldn't hear, Charles whispered, "Next time we'll just take them out somewhere." That sentence cut deeper than anything he'd ever said. Henry wasn't married, but he was just as distant, always on his phone, always rushing off to some meeting. Holidays became short, awkward visits. Expensive gifts we didn't need. Quick hugs, faster goodbyes. Then came the pressure. "You should sell the house," Jasmine suggested one visit. "There are nice retirement communities." Retirement community. Like we were furniture that needed storage. Charles even showed up one day with paperwork already filled out. "This house isn't worth much," he said casually. "If you sell it, I can help you move somewhere better." Better? According to who? They wanted Ernest to retire too, said it was dangerous for him to work at his age, said they were worried. But it didn't feel like worry. It felt like urgency. Something darker. Ernest felt it too. One night he said something that stuck with me. "Something's not right. This isn't just about money." 3 weeks before his death, Charles came over alone. He sat at the kitchen table, serious, almost rehearsed. "No matter what happens, Mom," he said, "Henry and I will always take care of you." At the time, it sounded comforting. Standing at Ernest's grave, it sounded like a warning. The accident happened on Tuesday morning. Ernest left early for the shop, like always. I was making his favorite lunch when the phone rang. "Mrs. Hayes," a voice said, "your husband has been in a serious accident. You need to come immediately." I don't remember the drive. I don't remember breathing. I just remember seeing Charles and Henry already at the hospital when I arrived. That should have raised questions. It didn't. Grief makes you blind. Ernest was burned, unconscious, hooked to machines. I held his hand and felt him squeeze back, just barely. He was fighting. 3 days later, the doctors told me there was no hope. Charles and Henry talked about insurance while their father was still alive. That's when my heart started screaming that something was wrong. Ernest died early Friday morning, and within an hour, my sons were arranging funerals, filing claims, choosing caskets. Efficient, cold, too cold. And now here I was, standing over his grave, phone shaking in my hand, reading words that should have been impossible. "I'm alive. That's not me. Don't trust our sons." I looked up at Charles. He was checking his watch. I looked at Henry. He wouldn't meet my eyes. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just grief talking. This was the beginning of something far worse. And what I uncovered next would prove that the man I buried might not have been the first victim, but he was never meant to be the last. That night after the funeral, the house felt wrong. Not quiet. Wrong. It's hard to explain unless you've lived with someone for decades and then suddenly they're gone. Every sound feels louder. Every shadow feels heavier. Ernest's coffee mug was still on the counter. His jacket still hung by the door. His tools were exactly where he left them. But what kept replaying in my head wasn't the emptiness. It was that message. "I'm alive. That's not me." don't trust our sons." I locked the doors, something I'd never felt the need to do before. Spring Creek was the kind of town where people left keys in their cars, but that night I checked the locks twice. Then my phone buzzed again. Check the bank account. I sat down hard at the kitchen table, my heart thudding like it wanted out of my chest. Whoever was sending these messages knew too much about Ernest, about my sons, about things no stranger should know. I didn't sleep. Not a minute. The next morning, I went to the bank we'd used for over 30 years. Mrs. Thompson, the manager, greeted me with sad eyes and a gentle squeeze of my hand. "I'm so sorry, Margot. Ernest was a good man." "I need to see our account statements," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. She nodded and pulled them up. As she slid the papers across the desk, I felt the room spin. Withdrawals. Big ones. $1,000, $3,000, $4,000. Over the past 3 months. Money I never knew was taking. "Who authorized these?" I asked, already dreading the answer. "Your husband," she said. "He came in personally." My stomach dropped. Ernest hated banks. He avoided paperwork like the plague, and he never would have withdrawn that much without telling me. "Was he alone?" I asked. Mrs. Thompson hesitated. "Well, no, I believe Charles was with him once or twice. He said he was helping his father read the documents." I felt something crack inside my chest. Ernest wore his glasses all day. He didn't need help reading anything. When I got home, my phone buzzed again. The insurance was their idea. They convinced him it was for you. I went straight to Ernest's old desk, the metal lockbox where he kept everything: insurance papers, deeds, receipts. That's when I saw it. The life insurance policy. It had been updated 6 months ago, from $5,000 to $50,000. My hands shook so badly I dropped the papers. Ernest never would have done that without telling me. Never. There was more, a workers' compensation policy I'd never seen before, taken out just 2 months before his death. My phone vibrated. It was a trap. I sat there for a long time, staring at the wall, trying to convince myself this was all some horrible coincidence. Then another message came in. Go to the shop. So I did. It was the first time I'd stepped foot in Ernest's ship since the so-called accident. Charles told me a machine exploded. Severe burns. That's what they said. But when I unlocked the door and stepped inside, my breath caught. The shop was spotless. Too spotless. No scorch marks, no broken machinery, no signs of an explosion anywhere. Every tool was in its place, every machine intact. I whispered out loud, "What exploded?" Nothing answered. I went to Ernest's desk at the back, opened the drawer, and found a notebook. Inside were short entries written in his handwriting. Charles keeps insisting I increase the insurance, says it's for Margot. Doesn't feel right. Henry brought papers today, says they're upgrades. I don't understand them. Why the rush? My knees gave out. I sat on the floor, holding that notebook like it was a lifeline. Then I found an envelope. My name on it. Margot. Inside was a letter. My dearest Margot, if you're reading this, something has happened to me. I felt uneasy lately. The boys are asking too many questions about money, about insurance, about my routine. If something happens, please don't trust anyone blindly, not even our sons. I cried harder than I had at the funeral because Ernest knew. He felt it coming and he tried to protect me. That evening, Charles showed up unannounced, bottle of wine in his hand, smile plastered on his face. "Mom," he said, stepping inside like nothing had happened. I've been thinking about your future. My future, of course. The insurance money is processing, he continued. About 15,000 total. We should talk about what to do with it. How do you know the exact amount? I asked. He didn't even flinch. I helped Dad with the paperwork. Lie. What do you think I should do? I asked calmly. His eyes lit up just a little. A smaller house or a nice care community. Henry and I could manage your finances, make the money grow. Manage my finances, like they manage their father's life? After he left, my phone vibrated again. Tomorrow, police station, ask for the accident report. The next day, I did exactly that. Sergeant O'Connell looked confused when I asked about the report. What accident? He said. The explosion at my husband's shop. He flipped through files, then looked back at me, pale. Mrs. Hayes, your husband wasn't brought in from a work accident. My ears rang. What do you mean? The hospital report states immediate family requested confidentiality, said you were too fragile. Immediate family. My sons. They lied about everything. They lied about the accident, the burns, the cause. Someone poisoned my husband. That night, Henry came over, flowers in hand. You look tired, Mom. I went to the police, I said. I watched his face carefully. For half a second, panic slipped through. There's no report of an explosion, I continued. Why is that? He spilled his coffee. You're confused, he said quickly. Grief does that. No, lies do that. He left fast, too fast. And that night, the message came. They're coming tomorrow, together. They'll say you're imagining things. Don't eat or drink anything they bring. The next morning, Charles and Henry arrived with Jasmine, pastries, coffee, concerned faces. They sat me down like a child. We're worried about you, Charles said. You've been acting strangely. Doctors agree, Henry added. What doctors? I asked. Dr. Albright, Jasmine said smoothly. It's common for women your age to develop paranoia. Paranoia. They were laying the groundwork. Care home, legal control, selling the house, taking everything. And if I refuse? I asked. Charles smiled, cold and calm. Then we'll have to do this legally. After they left, my phone vibrated. Tonight, Corner Cafe, 3 p.m. tomorrow. My name is Stephen Callahan, the man my husband hired, the man who knew the truth, and the man who would finally confirm what I was terrified to accept. My sons didn't just kill their father. They were coming for me next. I didn't sleep that night either. Not because I was scared anymore. Fear had already done its damage. What kept me awake was clarity. The kind that hits you when all the pieces finally line up and there's no room left for denial. My sons murdered their father. And if I didn't move fast, I was next. Before we go any further, if you're still here, you already know this isn't just another story. This is the kind of truth that crawls under your skin and stays there. So if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed because stories like this deserve to be heard all the way through. Now stay with me because what happened next changed everything. At exactly 3 o'clock the next afternoon, I walked into the Corner Cafe downtown. Same place Ernest and I used to stop for pie on Sundays. I chose the back table, like the message said, and ordered chamomile tea. My hands shook just enough to ripple the surface of the cup. At 3 on the dot, a man approached my table. Mid-50s, gray hair, calm eyes, the kind of presence that makes you feel like someone's finally in control. Mrs. Hayes? He asked quietly. I nodded. I'm Stephen Callahan. Ernest hired me. Hearing my husband's name out loud like that nearly broke me. Stephen sat down and placed a thick brown folder on the table between us. I need to warn you, he said gently. What you're about to hear is going to hurt." "I've been hurting for weeks," I replied. "Just tell me the truth." He took out a small recorder and pressed play. My husband's voice filled the space. "Stephen, if something happens to me, it won't be an accident. The boys are pushing too hard. Insurance, money, my routine. I don't feel safe." I closed my eyes. That was Ernest, calm, careful, already protecting me. Stephen stopped the recording. "That was 3 weeks before his death," he said, "but there's more." He played another file. This time it was Charles's voice. "No, we can't wait. He's starting to question things. I already got the methanol. It'll look like a stroke." I felt like I was falling. Stephen played another. Henry's voice, laughing softly. "Once Dad's gone, Mom won't be a problem. She'll be shattered. We'll handle her." I couldn't breathe. My sons planned this, methodically, coldly. Stephen slid photographs across the table. Charles buying methanol at a hardware store, dates, times, receipts. "He paid cash," he said, "used a fake name, amateur mistake." There were bank statements, too. Debts. Charles owed $70,000 to a private lender. Henry had gambling debts pushing $40,000. They were desperate, he said, and desperate people do ugly things. I stared at the evidence, numb. "Why didn't you go to the police right away?" I asked. "Because they bribed the attending doctor, changed the cause of death. Without proof of poisoning, it would have gone nowhere." He leaned in. "But we have proof now." Then he played the last recording. This one shattered what was left of my heart. "Once we get the insurance, we deal with Mom. Same way. It'll look like depression. Nobody questions a grieving widow." I was shaking uncontrollably. "They were going to kill me," I whispered. Stephen nodded. "Tomorrow. They're trying to declare you mentally incompetent." That's when something inside me snapped. "No," I said, standing up. "We go to the police now." That night, Stephen walked me to the station. Sergeant O'Connell listened in silence as the recordings played. When it was over, he leaned back, pale. "This is first-degree murder and conspiracy. I want them arrested tonight." By dawn, arrest warrants were signed. At 6 a.m, my phone rang. It was Charles. "Mom, you need to come over. Something terrible happened." I knew it was a lie. I stayed home. At 7:30, police cars raced past my window. At 9, Sergeant O'Connell knocked on my door. They're in custody, both of them. I didn't cry. I just felt empty. 3 days later, Ernest's body was exhumed. The lab confirmed it. Methanol. The trial came fast. The town packed the courtroom. When the recordings played, people gasped. Some cried. Some walked out. When I testified, I looked straight at my sons. The men sitting there are not the boys I raised. Those boys died the moment greed replaced love. The jury didn't take long. Guilty, on all counts. Life in prison. After the verdict, Jasmine came to my house, begging. "He didn't mean it," she cried. I looked her dead in the eyes. He planned to kill me next. Charles didn't last long in prison. 3 months later, he took his own life. Henry broke, mentally. He's still alive, but not really. I donated every cent of the insurance money. I turned Ernest's shop into a garden, and 5 years later, I sit on my porch every evening, coffee in hand, telling his story. Because silence protects monsters, and truth, no matter how painful, saves lives. And if you're listening to this and something feels wrong in your own life, trust that feeling. Love doesn't manipulate. Family doesn't threaten. And greed always shows its face in the end. For a long time after the verdict, people kept asking me the same question. How are you holding up? I never knew how to answer that. Because the truth is, you don't hold up after something like this. You don't bounce back. You don't heal cleanly. You learn how to live with the scar that never really fades. And if you're still listening right now, still walking this road with me, I want you to understand something important. The story didn't end when my sons were sentenced. That was just the moment the noise stopped. What came after was quieter and somehow heavier. After the trial, Spring Creek changed. Or maybe I just started seeing it clearly. People avoided eye contact at the grocery store. Some hugged me too tightly. Others whispered when they thought I couldn't hear. In a town, this small tragedy doesn't stay private. It becomes a mirror, forcing everyone to look at things they'd rather ignore. Some people called me brave, others called me cruel. A woman at church pulled me aside one Sunday and whispered, "I don't know if I could ever do what you did. Sending your own sons to prison?" I looked at her and said quietly, "I didn't send my sons anywhere. They walk there themselves." That shut her up. The house felt different without the constant pressure. No surprise visits, no forced smiles, no paperwork shoved in my face. But peace didn't come right away. Silence can be loud when it's full of memories. Every morning, I still woke up expecting to hear Ernest moving around the kitchen. Every evening, I caught myself setting out 2 cups instead of 1. Grief doesn't follow logic. It ambushes you when you least expect it. Stephen checked in on me often. Sometimes he'd just sit on the porch with me, no talking, just company. That mattered more than he probably realized. One afternoon, about a month after the trial, I got a letter. Prison mail. Charles. I stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. His handwriting was shaky, unfamiliar. Mom. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I don't even deserve to be called your son anymore. But I need you to know that I regret everything. The debts, the lies, the plan. It all got out of control. We told ourselves it was just money, just one bad decision. But it turned us into monsters. I don't expect you to write back. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry. I read it once, then again. And then I folded it carefully and put it in a box. Because forgiveness isn't something you owe someone just because they ask for it. A week later, I got another letter. This one was from Henry. It wasn't an apology. It was rambling, disjointed, half-finished sentences. He wrote about Dad visiting him at night, standing at the foot of his bed, asking why. The prison psychiatrist later told me Henry had suffered a complete mental breakdown after Charles's arrest. Guilt ate him alive. Or maybe fear did. Either way, the man I once knew was gone. And then came the call that made me sit down hard on the kitchen floor. Charles was dead. He'd taken his own life in his cell. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, holding the phone, feeling something hollow open up inside me. Losing a child, even one who betrayed you, is not something the human heart is designed to process. It doesn't matter what they did. Biology doesn't care about morality. The pain shows up anyway. But here's the part most people don't like to hear. I didn't feel guilt. I felt grief for the boy he used to be. The one who laughed in the yard. The one who hugged his father's legs when he was scared of thunderstorms. That child died long before the man did. Henry was transferred to a psychiatric facility not long after. They said he talked to walls, refused to eat, kept asking guards if his father had forgiven him yet. I never visited. Some people call that heartless. I call it survival. A few months later, I made a decision that surprised everyone. I donated every cent of the insurance money. All of it. To an organization that helps victims of family-related crimes. People told me I was crazy. That money is yours, they said. You earned it. No, that money was poisoned. It came from greed, manipulation, and murder. I could never spend it and sleep at night. But if it could help someone else escape what I went through, then at least it would mean something. That donation changed my life in ways I didn't expect. Families started reaching out, quietly, desperately. Stories that sounded way too familiar. A daughter who suspected her brother had forged their mother's will. A man whose uncle died suddenly after refusing to sell property. A woman who felt trapped by relatives controlling her finances. I realized then that my story wasn't unique. It was just exposed. With Stephen's help, I created a small foundation in Ernest's name. Nothing fancy, just legal guidance, investigative support, and someone to listen when a gut feeling won't go away. Helping others became my anchor. It gave my days purpose again. The shop was next. Ernest's shop had been sitting empty since his death. I couldn't bring myself to sell it, not after everything. One afternoon, I unlocked the door and just stood there, breathing in the smell of oil and dust and memory. And then I knew. I tore it all out. The machines, the workbenches, the shelves. I turned it into a garden. People thought I was losing it again. But when the first flowers bloomed, something inside me softened. I planted roses, sunflowers, white carnations, things that reached for the light without asking permission. Every Sunday, I cut fresh flowers and walked to Ernest's grave. I tell him about my week, about the families we helped, about Stephen, about how quiet the porch feels now. Sometimes the wind moves through the trees just right, and I swear I can feel him listening. 5 years have passed since that day in the cemetery. I'm 71 now. My hair is completely white. Doris says my eyes look lighter, like I finally set something down. Spring Creek still talks about the case. It's become a warning story parents tell their kids when they talk about greed and entitlement. Some still judge me. That's fine. I know what I did. And more importantly, I know why. A reporter once asked me, if you could go back, would you do anything differently? I told her no. Because truth doesn't destroy families. Lies do. I assure you, it's in 6. Greed does. Silence does. And if you're listening to this right now, and something in your life doesn't feel right, don't ignore it. Don't explain it away. Don't let anyone tell you you're imagining things just because it's uncomfortable for them. Love doesn't isolate you. Concern doesn't rush you. And family doesn't plan your funeral while you're still breathing. If this story meant something to you, stay with me. There's more I want to share. Because survival isn't the end of the story. Finding peace is. And that took me longer than justice ever did. People think peace shows up all at once. Like a switch flips. Like one morning you wake up and the weight is gone. That's a lie. Peace comes in pieces. Small, fragile pieces. And sometimes, just when you think you finally got it, life reaches back and tests whether you really learned anything at all. If you're still here with me, you already know this story isn't about crime anymore. It's about what comes after survival. So before we keep going, take a second, hit like, subscribe, and stay connected. Not because I'm chasing numbers, but because stories like this matter. and they only matter if they're heard. Now let me tell you about the year everything almost broke me again. It started quietly. A letter in the mail. No return address. Just my name, written carefully. Inside was a single sentence. You ruined our family. No signature, no explanation. At first, I told myself it was just some bored stranger, a true crime junkie with too much time and not enough sense. But then another letter came, and another, always short, always sharp. You should have kept quiet. Blood should stay in the family. You're not the victim you think you are. That's when I knew. Someone out there blamed me. Stephen told me not to worry. Cases like yours attract broken people, he said. Some identify with the criminals, some project their own guilt. But the letters kept coming. Then the phone calls started. Silent calls, breathing on the line, hanging up the second I spoke. For the first time in years, I felt that old fear creep back in, the kind that sits in your chest and whispers, "You're not as safe as you think." I didn't tell many people. I didn't want pity. I didn't want protection. I wanted control. So I did what Ernest taught me to do when something felt wrong. I paid attention. The calls always came on Tuesdays. The letters always arrived on Thursdays. Same timing, same pattern. Someone nearby. Spring Creek has a way of shrinking when you start looking too closely. Familiar faces suddenly feel unfamiliar. Friendly smiles feel forced. I started noticing who lingered a little too long when I passed, who watched instead of waved. And then one afternoon at the grocery store, I saw her. Linda Bowers. She'd been at the trial every single day, sat in the front row, took notes, never missed a session. At the time, I thought she was just another curious local. Now, I wasn't so sure. She stood 2 aisles over, pretending to examine canned soup, watching me through the shelf gaps. When our eyes met, she smiled. Too wide, too fast. That night, another letter arrived. You took everything from them. I brought the letters to Stephen the next morning. This is fixation, he said, and fixation can turn dangerous. They traced the calls to a prepaid phone. We went to the police. No name, no address, but the postmarks on the letters were local. Very local. They asked if I wanted protection. I said no. Not yet. Because fear only wins when you let it decide your next move. A week later, the foundation hosted a small community meeting. Just a handful of families, coffee, folding chairs, quiet conversations. Halfway through, the door opened. Linda walked in. No invitation. No hesitation. She sat down like she belonged there. I felt my pulse spike, but I kept my face calm. At the end of the meeting, as people packed up, she approached me. "You're very brave," she said softly. "Thank you," I replied. "They didn't deserve what happened to them," she added. I looked straight at her. "Who didn't?" Her eyes flickered. "Your sons." There was. I took a breath. "They murdered their father," I said evenly. She shook her head. "They were pushed. By pressure. By expectations. By you. By me." The audacity of it almost made me laugh. "You don't know me," I said. "I know enough," she replied. You aired private family matters for the whole world. Some things should stay hidden. That sentence sent a chill through me. Truth doesn't rot in the dark, I said. Lies do. Her smile disappeared. That night, Stephen insisted I stay with him. That thing I did. Because at 2 a.m, someone tried to break into my house. The police caught her 2 blocks away. Linda. In her car, they found copies of court transcripts, newspaper clippings, photos of my house, a notebook filled with rambling entries about injustice and betrayal. She believed my sons were victims. She believed I was the villain. She believed she was fixing something. They charged her with stalking and attempted trespass. A restraining order followed. But the damage was already done. I realized then that survival doesn't end when the danger is gone. It ends when your mind finally accepts that you're allowed to live again. That took work. Real work. Therapy, long walks, learning how to sit with silence without drowning in it. Some days were easy. Others knocked the air out of me. I'd hear a father laughing with his son at the park and have to leave. I'd see brothers walking together downtown and feel that ache twist deep in my ribs. Grief isn't just missing someone. It's missing the future you thought you'd have. The foundation kept growing. We helped more families, prevented a few disasters, exposed a few quiet schemes before they turned deadly. One case still haunts me. An elderly man whose niece was slowly isolating him, controlling his finances, convincing everyone he was confused. Sound familiar? We intervened just in time. When he hugged me afterward, he whispered, "They told me no one would believe me." That sentence broke my heart. Because I believed it once too. Then something unexpected happened. I laughed again. Not a polite laugh, not a sad one, a real one. It caught me off guard. It happened at the farmer's market, of all places. A little boy dropped a basket of apples and started chasing them down the street, laughing like it was the best game in the world. I laughed with him. And for a moment, everything felt okay. That's when I knew. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. I sold the house a year later, not because anyone pressured me, because I was ready. I moved into a smaller place near the garden, somewhere with less memory trapped in the walls. I kept Ernest's chair. I still talk to him some nights. I tell him about the people we helped, about the garden, about how I finally learned to forgive myself for not seeing the signs sooner. Because that guilt, it sneaks up on you. But here's the truth I had to accept. Love doesn't make you stupid. Manipulation makes you blind. And blame belongs where the action was, not where the trust lived. If you're listening to this and you've ever been told you're overreacting, imagining things, or causing trouble by speaking up, hear me clearly. You're not wrong for asking questions. You're not weak for noticing patterns. And you're not evil for protecting yourself. Part of me wishes this story had ended with justice alone. But life isn't that clean. Sometimes, the real victory is choosing to keep going. Choosing to trust again. Choosing not to become bitter. And in the next part, I'm going to tell you about the moment I finally understood why Ernest trusted me to finish what he started. Because his last lesson to me wasn't about fear. It was about courage. And that lesson saved more than just my life. There's a moment in every long fight when you realize something important. You're not fighting the enemy anymore. You're fighting yourself. That's where I was when part 6 of this story really began. Not with danger, not with police or courtrooms or threats in the night, but with a question I couldn't stop asking myself. Who am I now? For decades, I was someone's wife, someone's mother, someone who held the family together quietly, without applause. And then, in the span of a few months, all of that was stripped away. What was left was a woman who survived something no one should ever have to face. And survival, I learned, comes with a responsibility. Before we go deeper, if you've stayed with this story this far, I want you to know I don't take that lightly. So make sure you're subscribed and staying connected, because the next part isn't about what was done to me. It's about what I chose to do next. The moment came on an ordinary afternoon. I was in the garden that used to be Ernest's shop, pulling weeds, hands in the dirt, when Stephen stopped by with coffee. He watched me for a while, then said something that caught me off guard. "You know," he said, "you could walk away from all of this." "All of what?" I asked. "The foundation, the meetings, the stories. You've earned your rest." I leaned back on my heels and looked at him. "Ernest didn't hire you so I could rest," I said. Stephen smiled, but his eyes were serious. "No," he admitted. "He hired me because he knew you'd do something with the truth." That sentence stayed with me, because deep down, I knew he was right. The foundation had started as a way to survive, a way to turn pain into something useful, but it was becoming something bigger. People weren't just asking for help anymore. They were asking me to speak. At first, I said no. Public speaking terrified me. Courtrooms were one thing, a microphone and an audience were another, but the requests kept coming. Community centers, senior advocacy groups, financial safety seminars. Finally, I agreed to one. Just one. The room was small, maybe 30 people. Folding chairs, bad coffee, a flickering projector. My hands shook as I stood at the front. "I'm not a professional," I said. "I'm just someone who learned things the hard way." By the time I finished, the room was silent. Then a woman in the front row started crying. "My son keeps asking me to sign papers," she said. I thought I was being dramatic. I walked over and held her hand. "You're not," I said. That night, I didn't sleep, but not because of fear. Because I understood my purpose. I wasn't meant to be quiet. The invitations multiplied. I learned how to tell my story without reliving it, how to pause when my chest tightened, how to breathe through the memories without letting them drown me. Every talk ended the same way. Someone stayed behind. A man whose brother controlled his bank account. A woman afraid her niece was isolating her. A couple who felt pressured to change a will under family advice. Patterns. Always patterns. And I started teaching people what Ernest taught me without realizing it. Urgency is a red flag. Secrecy is a warning. Love doesn't rush signatures. One evening, after a talk in a neighboring town, a young man approached me. Late 20s, nervous. "My dad died last year," he said. "The doctor said it was natural, but my uncles moved fast, too fast." I felt that familiar chill. We connected him with the right people. 3 months later, an investigation was opened. Sometimes justice comes late. Sometimes it comes because someone finally speaks. Not all stories ended well. Some families chose denial. Some victims went back to the very people hurting them. That was the hardest part. You can't save someone who isn't ready to see the truth. I had to learn that lesson too. Around this time, the guilt resurfaced in a new way. Survivor's guilt. Why did I make it out when Ernest didn't? Why did I get a second chance? I asked my therapist that once. She leaned forward and said, "Maybe you're alive because someone needed you to be." That thought changed everything. I stopped asking why. I started asking how. How do I use this time? How do I honor him? The answer came one morning in the mail. A letter from the governor's office. They were drafting new protections for elderly financial abuse victims. Someone had recommended me as a consultant. Me. A woman who once thought she was just a housewife in a small town. I accepted. Sitting in those meetings was surreal. Lawyers, officials, experts, and then there was me talking about kitchen table conversations, subtle pressure, emotional manipulation. The things that don't show up on paper. They listened. Some laws take years to change. Some minds take minutes. But progress began. On the drive home from the Capitol, I pulled over and cried. Not from sadness, from gratitude. I wished Ernest could see it. That night, I sat on the porch and talked to him like I always do. "You were right," I said into the quiet. "I wasn't meant to stay small." The garden bloomed that spring like it never had before. Flowers everywhere. Bees, birds, life pushing forward without apology. I started writing things down. Notes, lessons, warnings, stories people shared with me. Stephen joked that I was writing a book. I laughed it off. But the idea stuck. What if someone out there needed these words before it was too late? What if this story could reach someone sitting in fear right now, wondering if they were imagining things? That's when I decided. I wasn't done telling this story. Not yet. Because the hardest part of survival isn't escaping danger. It's learning to trust yourself again. And in the next part, I'm going to tell you about the moment that trust was tested one last time by someone I never expected. Someone who forced me to choose between safety and truth. And that choice, it changed everything. You never really expect the past to knock on your door again. You tell yourself you've dealt with it, you've processed it, you've turned the page. But the truth is, the past doesn't disappear. It waits. And when it comes back, it doesn't ask permission. Part 7 of this story begins on a Tuesday morning that looked exactly like every other Tuesday. Coffee on the porch, birds in the garden. A quiet kind of peace I'd worked hard to earn. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. I usually don't. But something in my chest tightened, that familiar instinct I've learned not to ignore. "Mrs. Hayes?" a man asked. Young voice. Nervous. "Yes." "My name is Daniel Price. I think your husband saved my life." That sentence knocked the air out of me. He asked if we could meet, said it was important, said it had to do with Ernest's last weeks. Every alarm bell went off at once. Stephen told me to be careful. We don't know his angle, he said. People lie. But I agreed to meet anyway. Public place. Afternoon. Cafe downtown. Daniel was already there when I arrived. Early 30s. Clean cut. Hands shaking slightly as he stood. Thank you for coming, he said. I know this must sound strange. You said my husband saved your life, I replied. Start there. He swallowed hard. I worked at the hardware store in the next town, he said. About a year ago, a man came in asking about methanol. My heart dropped. That man was your son, Daniel continued. Charles. I gripped the edge of the table. He told me it was for cleaning engine parts, Daniel said. Something felt off. He was nervous, rushed, asked how fast it would take effect if ingested. That chill ran straight through me. Daniel leaned forward. I refused to sell it to him. I stared at him. Then how? He went to another store, Daniel said quietly. But that's not the part that matters. I waited. Your husband came in 2 days later, he said. He asked about poisoning, symptoms, smells, things someone would miss. My chest tightened. He said he felt like someone was trying to hurt him. Daniel continued. I told him to trust his instincts. I told him to document everything, to get help. Tears blurred my vision. He knew, I whispered. Daniel nodded. I didn't come forward at first because I was scared, he said. Your sons were powerful. Money. Lawyers. I convinced myself it wasn't my business. I'd heard that excuse before. But then I heard your story, he said. The trial, the recordings, and I couldn't live with staying quiet. I studied his face. Why now? I asked. He hesitated. Because someone contacted me. My stomach clenched. Who? A woman, he said. Said she was working on a documentary. Asked if I remembered anything about your husband, or the methanol. Stephen's warning echoed in my head. What was her name? I asked. Daniel shook his head. She didn't give one, but she knew details that weren't public. I felt that old, familiar pressure building. Someone was digging. That afternoon, Stephen made some calls. It didn't take long. The woman wasn't a journalist. She was connected to Henry, a legal advocacy group arguing for sentence reductions based on mental incompetence and family manipulation. They were building a narrative that Charles acted alone, that Henry was influenced, that I was controlling, that Ernest was paranoid. They wanted to rewrite history. Stephen asked me the question I'd been dreading. Do you want to go public again? I looked out at the garden. I never wanted to be public in the first place, I said. But silence is what almost got me killed. The next week, an article appeared online. Anonymous sources claimed new evidence suggested family misunderstandings and overlooked mental health factors. It didn't name me, but it painted me as unstable. Comments were brutal. She pushed them. Money does things to people. We don't know the whole story. I didn't sleep for 3 nights. Not because I doubted the truth, because I knew how dangerous lies could be when repeated enough times. Stephen arranged a press conference. I hated the idea, but I agreed. I stood at the podium with the garden behind me, cameras flashing, microphones everywhere. I didn't choose to tell this story again, I said, but I refused to let lies erase the truth. I played the recordings, all of them. I showed the evidence. Receipts, timelines, letters. And then I said something I hadn't planned. My sons were not monsters from birth, I said. They were people who chose greed over love. That choice matters. The room was silent. The article disappeared within 24 hours. The advocacy group backed off. Henry's appeal was denied. But the cost was real. The attention triggered memories I thought I'd buried. The comments reopened wounds. I felt raw all over again. That night, I told Stephen I was done. No more interviews, I said. No more fighting. He nodded. You don't owe anyone anything. I believed that. Until Daniel called again. They're going after other cases, he said, using the same playbook. Discredit the victim, reframe the crime. I closed my eyes. I could walk away. I'd earned that right. But then I thought about the woman from my first talk, the one who cried, the man who said no one would believe him. And I realized something. This wasn't about me anymore. It never was. I took a breath. Tell me what you know, I said. Because sometimes the final test of healing isn't choosing peace. It's choosing courage when peace would be easier. And in the next part, I'm going to tell you how that decision led to the one thing I never expected to find at the end of all this. Closure. Not revenge. Not justice. But something quieter. Something that finally let me rest. There's a strange kind of exhaustion that comes from doing the right thing over and over again. Not the tired you feel in your body, the tired you feel in your soul. That's where I was when part 8 began. I had survived danger. I had faced truth. I had spoken up when silence would have been easier. And yet, every time I thought the storm was finally over, another wave came rolling in. Still, I chose to stand. Daniel started bringing me files, not originals, copies, whispers from inside systems that didn't like attention, patterns that looked way too familiar. Elderly parents declared confused just weeks before wills were changed. Accidental deaths followed by rapid insurance claims. Family members who handled everything while shutting everyone else out. Different names. Same story. And the worst part? Most of these cases never made the news. No drama. No trials. No recordings. Just quiet funerals and uncomfortable questions that nobody wanted to ask. I realized something chilling. What happened to Ernest wasn't rare. It was just sloppy. One case hit me harder than the rest. A woman named Eleanor, 72, widow, lived with her nephew after a minor stroke. Neighbors noticed she stopped coming outside, stopped answering calls. Her pension was redirected, her house quietly listed for sale. By the time anyone intervened, she was gone. Cause of death, complications. Sound familiar? Her nephew walked free. I sat at my kitchen table that night, hands wrapped around a cold cup of tea, staring at nothing. This is bigger than me, I said to Stephen. He nodded. It always was. That's when we decided to stop reacting and start building. We expanded the foundation, brought in legal advisors, financial auditors, therapists who specialized in coercive control. We created something simple but powerful. A checklist. Questions families should ask. Behaviors that signal manipulation. Steps to take before signing anything. No fear tactics, no drama, just clarity. We started distributing it quietly at first. Libraries, clinics, churches, community centers. But then the calls increased. Not panic calls. Grateful ones. My daughter backed off when I asked these questions. My brother stopped pushing when a lawyer got involved. I finally felt brave enough to say no. Those calls did more for my healing than any therapy session ever could. Because every time someone protected themselves, a little bit of Ernest's warning lived on. One evening, months later, I got an email. No subject line. Just a message. I'm alive because of you. It was from a man in another state. His sons had tried to move him into a care facility and take control of his assets. He recognized the signs, asked questions, delayed, investigated. They called me ungrateful, he wrote, but I'm still here, in my home, on my terms. I cried harder than I had in years. Not from pain, from relief. That's when I understood something important. Ernest didn't survive, but his instincts did. And now, so did I. The world eventually gets quiet again. News cycles move on. People find new stories, new scandals, new tragedies. And one day you wake up and realize no one is talking about you anymore. That day scared me more than I expected. Because without the noise, there was space. Space to think. Space to remember. Space to ask the questions I'd been avoiding. What does a life look like after purpose becomes routine? I stepped back. Not from the foundation, from the spotlight. Stephen took over the day-to-day operations. Daniel moved on to formal advocacy work. I kept my role small, intentional. I started saying no to interviews to panels to being introduced as that woman. I wanted to just be Margot again. I filled my days with simple things. Morning walks cooking meals Ernest loved. Reading books I'd never had time for. And something unexpected happened. I felt lonely. Not for my sons. For the idea of family. That ache never fully goes away. You just learn where to place it so it doesn't crush you. One afternoon, while tending the garden, a little girl leaned over the fence. "What are you growing?" she asked. "Second chances," I said without thinking. She laughed like it made perfect sense. Her name was Lily. She lived next door with her mom. Over time, she started helping me water the plants. Her mom joined us sometimes, then dinner, then holidays. Not replacements. Additions. That's when I learned another truth. You don't rebuild life by replacing what you lost. You rebuild it by expanding. One night, sitting alone on the porch, I asked Ernest out loud, did I do enough? The wind moved through the trees. And for the first time, the question didn't hurt. Because I already knew the answer. People ask me now how this story ends. They expect something dramatic. A final revelation. A last confrontation. A perfect moment of closure. Life doesn't work like that. This story doesn't end with a bang. It ends with a breath. A deep one. I'm older now. Slower. Softer in ways I never used to be. Stronger in ways I never imagined. I still visit Ernest's grave every Sunday. I still talk to him. I still update him on the garden, the foundation, the people who found their voice. Sometimes I tell him about the quiet. He would have liked that part. Henry remains institutionalized, his appeals exhausted, his mind fragmented. I don't follow updates anymore, not out of anger, out of acceptance. Charles is gone. I've made peace with grieving who he was, not what he became. Forgiveness didn't come all at once. It came in layers, and some layers never fully formed. That's okay. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's choosing not to carry poison forward. If there's one thing I want you to take from this entire story, it's this. Trust is not weakness. Love is not stupidity. And asking questions is not betrayal. If someone rushes you, pause. If someone isolates you, speak. If someone benefits from your silence, break it. Pay attention to patterns. Protect your autonomy. And never let anyone convince you that your instincts are a flaw. They're not. They're a gift. This story began with a message at a grave. I'm alive. That's not me. And in a way, that message was true. The woman I was died that day. The woman who stands here now. She's stronger. She's wiser. She's free. And if you stay with me until this moment, thank you. For listening. For believing. For carrying this story forward. Because silence protects monsters. But truth saves lives. And sometimes it saves your own.